"Hey, get out! First class isn't for people like you!" The shout tore through the cabin like a gunshot, startling heads from sleep and freezing mid-step passengers in the narrow aisle. It wasn't the kind of voice you could ignore. Sharp, slicing, dripping with authority, and laced with something far uglier. Every head swiveled toward the source, eyes narrowing in confusion, in curiosity, in disbelief, as a tall black woman stood frozen in the doorway of the first-class cabin, her boarding pass clutched tightly in one hand. She had not yet taken a single step toward her seat before the uniformed flight attendant was in her path, eyes cold, hand raised like a stop sign meant to block an intruder. And in that moment, the air on that plane turned from recycled oxygen to something electric, heavy, suffocating. But before I tell you exactly how she shattered that moment and silenced an entire plane, make sure you're subscribed right now, because we tell the stories they don't want you to hear. And the next one might just be the truth they tried to bury. Now let's go back, because to understand why this scene unfolded the way it did, you have to know who this woman was, where she was coming from, and why what happened next would leave everyone stunned. Her name was Dr. Angela Rowe, a board-certified cardiothoracic surgeon with over 15 years of saving lives in some of the most demanding operating rooms in the country. She wasn't just good at her job, she was exceptional. A name spoken with respect in medical circles, a mentor to dozens of young doctors, and a lifeline to countless patients who had lain on her table with hearts literally in her hands. But Angela wasn't returning from a conference or a luxury holiday. No, she was flying home after 2 grueling weeks volunteering in a war-torn region overseas, performing back-to-back surgeries on victims who had no other hope. Her hands were still aching from the hours in the operating theater, her body running on minimal rest, and every part of her longed for the comfort of the first-class seat she had paid for with her own hard-earned money, not as a reward, not as a luxury, but as the one quiet pocket of space where she could finally exhale after giving everything she had. The airport had been a blur. The endless shuffle through security lines, the weight of her carry-on pressing against her shoulder, the tired smiles at people who brushed past without seeing her. But it was when she stepped through that curtain toward her assigned seat in first class that everything shifted. She didn't make it more than 3 steps before she was met with the wall, not of metal or fabric, but of another human being who had already decided she did not belong there. The flight attendant's smile was absent, her voice clipped, eyes scanning Angela up and down as though she were an anomaly, a mistake, an inconvenience. Behind her, passengers in their spacious leather seats watched with the detached interest of people who sensed trouble but didn't want to get involved. Some sipped their champagne, others subtly lifted their phones. The attendant took the boarding pass, glanced at it for a fraction of a second, then handed it back without moving aside. Her words, loud enough for the front half of the plane to hear, came like a slap. "This section is for first-class passengers only." No please. No neutral tone, just that pointed emphasis on first class, as though it were a guarded fortress. A heat rose in Angela's chest, not from shame, but from the deep, familiar sting of knowing exactly what this was. She'd felt it before, in luxury stores where clerks shadowed her every step, in restaurants where servers hesitated to seat her, in boardrooms where her credentials were double-checked while others sailed through unquestioned. She had hoped, foolishly, that here, exhausted, ticket in hand, she would be spared. But the humiliation didn't stop there. The attendant asked her to step aside, her voice now carrying over the low hum of the engines. She repeated the seat number to a colleague who typed furiously into a handheld device as though confirming whether this black woman had indeed purchased a ticket to sit where, apparently, people like her did not belong. A man in the second row leaned forward, watching with open curiosity. A woman in pearls whispered something to her seatmate, eyes fixed on Angela. And still she stood, her posture tall despite the weight of every gaze pressing down on her. The second attendant returned, shaking her head slightly. Whether at Angela or at her colleague, it was hard to tell. But the first attendant didn't move. Instead, she gestured toward the economy cabin behind them. "We'll need you to wait back there until we can resolve this," she said, each word carefully measured to convey control. Angela's mind raced. She knew exactly what her ticket said. She knew exactly what she had paid for. But more than that, she knew the truth. No one else boarding before her had been stopped, questioned, or asked to prove their right to sit in the section their ticket assigned. The murmurs grew louder. A man a few rows back pulled out his phone and angled it toward her. Another passenger raised their brows, silently urging her to push back. But Angela didn't move toward economy. She didn't retreat. She simply stood there, holding her ground with the quiet authority of someone who had faced far more intimidating situations and emerged unshaken. And that was when the voice came. Not from her, but from behind the cockpit door. The captain had stepped out, curious about the holdup. He scanned the scene, taking in the tense posture of the attendant, the watchful eyes of the passengers, and Angela, standing tall with her boarding pass in plain view. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his tone calm but carrying the weight of command. The attendant shifted uncomfortably, explaining that there was some confusion about the seating. Angela said nothing. She didn't need to. The captain took the boarding pass, looked at it, then at her, then back to the pass. His expression didn't change, but his voice did. Firm, clear, final. "This is Dr. Angela Rowe," he announced to the cabin. "She is seated here, in first class, where her ticket says she belongs." He handed the pass back to her and stepped aside. The silence that followed was thick, almost brittle, like glass that could shatter at any second. The attendant's face flushed. Passengers shifted in their seats. A few even had the decency to look embarrassed. Angela walked past without a word, her head high, her steps steady. She slid into her seat, buckled in, and looked out the window as the engines roared to life. The rest of the flight passed in a strange quiet. The attendant avoided her eyes, the couple in pearls kept their gazes fixed ahead, and no one reached for their phone again. But Angela knew, and so did everyone else in that cabin, that something had happened that went beyond one seat, one flight, one woman. She had not only claimed the space she paid for, she had refused to yield to the unspoken but deeply ingrained belief that she didn't belong there. When the wheels touched down hours later, Angela gathered her things and stepped off the plane without looking back. But as she walked through the terminal, a man approached her, one of the passengers from first class. He didn't say much, just a quiet "thank you" before disappearing into the crowd. And in that moment, she knew it wasn't just about her anymore. It was about everyone who had been told, in ways subtle and blatant, that they didn't belong. Her response had been simple, to stand her ground, and it had shocked them all. So if you believe that stories like this matter, that they should be told, shared, and remembered, then make sure you're subscribed right now. Because the next story we bring you will be another truth they hoped would stay hidden. And trust me, you won't want to miss it.